I'm wondering, should I put everything back or should I wait?
What do you mean by putting everything back?
Like all the kitchen stuff.
We can't because he's going to paint.
Yeah, he's painting. Okay.
But the question is when?
Yeah, I don't know when. I'll ask.
If you could ask.
Yeah.
Because then he'd be finished.
That's right.
And that would be, that would make possible kind of a normal kitchen.
Yeah.
Right now, everything is just a mess.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go shopping after I get through my lecture.
Okay. I'll come with you if you don't mind.
You want to go? I'm going to go to the Keniston, to the
oh no.
Superstore.
I don't like that place.
Oh well, I do. There's all sorts of stuff there, including glasses.
Okay, go there then.
Yeah, I'll go there.
I like the co-op better.
No, the co-op is artificial food.
So, when do you have the second shot, Henry? When do you have your second vaccine? Like, did they give you the date for both of them or just for one?
You're saying about what?
The vaccine. Your vaccine.
Just one, the first one. I think they give you the date when you.
Okay, yeah. Make sure to ask my mom. They gave her both the times.
They should give both.
Yeah.
Yes, they should, but I don't think that they have. Well, they didn't have enough supply.
I see.
Yeah,
well, maybe.
They're saying that this AstraZeneca is not reliable. A lot of people are. I hope I'm getting Pfizer.
Yeah. I'm so happy you're getting it. Thank God you're getting it.
I am. Yeah, that'll be real. And when you get it, we can go to Vancouver, Victoria. That would be a wonderful thing to do.
I don't know when that's going to happen.
It's a bit more difficult traveling internationally.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the quarantines.
No, I guess we could always go to Vancouver, to Victoria. We could always go. Misty has come next to me. So cute.
I love my water bottle.
Oh, that's great. And you're putting warm water on it.
Yes, warm water. It's really, I didn't realize how,
Hey, look at it.
what a difference it makes.
It makes a huge difference drinking water.
Hello, are you there? Somebody? Hello?
We're here. We can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you, Professor.
Could somebody confirm that they can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hello?
We can hear you, Professor.
Thank you. Okay, ready to start? Yesterday I sent out I put up on Unlearn the grades for the essays, and people did quite well. And the grades for the test, I'm promised, will be available on Unlearn in the first part of this week, and I'll be monitoring that, and you should get that result as well. So then, what's left is, of course, the second paper and the final exam. And the final exam will be a take-home exam covering the whole course. And you'll have 3 parts, 3 questions each. You choose one question from each part in order to complete your examination. And I'll be giving the exam out at the beginning of the examination period. And a week later, you turn in the exam. That's then I mark and compute and give you your grade. Are there any questions? Okay. I want to start with yet another review question. We do have, the last time I did question 21, but since questions 22 and 23 basically are they're variations on question 20 and 21. Let me repeat that this question, question 22 is basically a variation on questions 20 and 21. I'm not going to bother with it. The answer lies in the previous 2 questions. Rather, I'm simply doing the next question, which asserts, this is question 23, the Jewish people were united at the time of the birth of Jesus. Discuss. And of course, the answer or response should be, they were not united at the time of Jesus, because in the first place, one should mention that most of the Jews actually lived outside of Palestine, in the so-called diaspora, in the dispersion. Diaspora means dispersion. They lived all over the Mediterranean world and throughout the Middle East, especially the big cities. In the diaspora, they were merchants and craftsmen, whereas in Palestine, most of them were peasants. But more particularly, what I want from this answer is basically for you to explain the different groups within the Jewish community. That is to say, the Sadducees, the priests, the Pharisees, or rabbis with their synagogues, the Jewish nationalists, and the Essenes. You should sort of lay out what each of these groups stood for in terms of both the Romans, how they related to the Romans, but also what possible role they played in Christianity. So that's basically the answer to this question. Do you have any questions? So just a second, I have to get my lecture notes. blue folder. Okay, we're more or less set. Notice what I put up. This map is just quite important, which is basically a map of the invasions by the barbarians, the German barbarians, mainly of the Roman Empire, their conquest of the Roman Empire in the West. Here you can see that in the eastern part of the empire, you see Constantinople here, which we discussed last time. Constantine had moved the capital essentially to Constantinople. That this, although it was invaded, you see there are invasions and important invasions in the East, because the East was stronger politically and economically. It was able to throw the invaders back, but in the West, the barbarian invasions obliterated Roman political authority. So this map sort of illustrates this. It's very, again, I said last time, and it bears repeating, it's quite complicated. And I'll sort of, I think the most important thing we can say is that these invasions, well, there was a first invasion in the 3rd century, which the Franks and the Alemanni and the Goths, that was thrown back by Diocletian and Constantine. But this is around about the end of the 4th century, a second and stronger wave of invasions occurred. And then again, yet a third wave of invasion. And it was the third wave that began to kind of set up a new order, a new structure of things. And I guess the stress should be put on the emergence of this new order of things. Because the invasions, it's hard to follow and it's less important. The overall process is, of course, the Roman Empire in the West is collapsing. The Germanic barbarians take over, but it's really the fusion of the two, the Germans and the Romans, which lays the basis of what we call Western civilization. That's basically what's going on. Now, of course, again, I say that the Eastern Roman Empire here did not go under. The Byzantine Empire, so-called, and we call this Byzantine because there was a little city here, little town called Byzantium, right about here. And the Eastern Roman Empire has the other name, the Byzantine Empire, as a result. Constantine, founding Constantinople, he created the basis for this Eastern Roman Empire, or this Byzantine Empire, with this fusion of Roman political authority, the Christianity, and Greek culture, because the majority of people were Greeks. And this entity, in contrast to the West, it survives right until almost the beginning of modern times. The city of Constantinople remains intact until 1453, when it was conquered by the Turks. but that's another story. In any case, right through the Middle Ages, there was essentially a well-developed, if authoritarian political civilization in the East, in contrast to the West. In the West, as I have explained, really from the 3rd century, cities and markets collapsed. From the 3rd century, the town life, the towns were more and more abandoned. The elites fled the towns and took up residence in these self-sufficient estates in the countryside with their villas and with their dependent peasants and slaves. This is what was going on all over Western Europe from the 3rd century onwards, and the process continues through the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th centuries. There is this really no markets, no money, no towns. The merchant class virtually disappears. There is a ruralization of society that occurs during this period. And really, we can name this period between 500 and 1000 AD. This is known as the Dark Ages, because everything that characterized antiquity basically disappears, and basically you have a reversion to a totally rural kind of society. So it's called the Dark Ages. We should also say that there are the Dark Ages, it's 500 to 1000, but the Dark Ages are part of what we call the Middle Ages. That is to say, from 500 to 1500 are the Middle Ages. And the Middle Ages, what the most fundamental characteristic is that the Roman Catholic Church dominates society between 500 and 1500 AD. It contrasts with the ancient world, the period of the Greeks and the Romans, and it's in contrast to modern times. Modern times begin after 1500. So we're now talking about the Middle Ages, roughly from 500 to 1500. And in particular, we're looking at the first period, the so-called Dark Ages from 500 to 1000 AD. Are there any questions about this? Okay. We can start by noting that you have a sense of the map, the sense of the Roman Empire, and in the West, there is Germania, where the barbarians live, and then there is the Roman Empire to the west and to the south. And the frontier is the Rhine River and the Danube River. Well, in Germania, or north of the Danube and east of the Rhine River, there were the tribes. And we could say that basically the tribes can be divided into the eastern tribes of Germania and the western tribes of Germania, the West German tribes and the East German tribes. Now, the East German tribes, as I've listed them, here is the list. The tribes were the Ostrogoths, the Visigoths, the Vandals, the Alans, the Burgundians, and the Lombards. These were the East. If you don't get this, it's okay. These were the East German tribes. And then in the West, closer to France or Gallia, there were the Franks, the Alemanni, who we're familiar with, but also there were the Saxons, the Angles, the Frisians, the Thuringians. Now, in terms of Canada, which of these tribes are the most important for us? I've mentioned the Frisians, the Thuringians, the Angles, the Saxons, the Thuringians, the Alemanni. Which of them was the most were most important? I'm talking about the formation of England and France. Anybody any idea? Well, obviously the Franks become the French. They take over Gallia and they become the French. And then the Angles and the Saxons, well, the Angles and the Saxons invade England and they become the dominant, they dominate over the Celts, and they essentially become the elite in English society. And we know that their dominance lasts right into modern times, the so-called Anglo-Saxons. So that's the story. Anyway, there were these tribes scattered to the north and the east of the two great rivers, the Rhine and the Danube. And as I explained previously, they lived in close proximity to the Romans. The Romans considered them to be barbarians, but they were living right across the border in large part, and they learned agricultural techniques, they traded, and they also learned military technology from the Romans. In fact, after the crisis of the 3rd century, the Romans began to allow some of these barbarians to enlist in the Roman legions because they couldn't recruit enough Romans. And so you see a certain infiltration of these barbarians even before the second wave of invasions began. In any case, the first invasion of the barbarians, I told you, it's the middle of the 3rd century. But toward the end of the 4th century, roughly around 370, the second wave of Germanic or barbarian invasions begin. We can see I'm trying to bring up the map. Well, you have the map. You have the map. In any case, the troubles started actually in Central Asia. Or we could say there is the Black Sea, as you're aware of. There is the Caspian Sea. These are mainly part of Russia, as you know. Well, in the steppes, north of the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, the two German tribes that lived there were the so-called Ostrogoths and the Visigoths. But from out of Central Asia, there began to emerge cavalrymen who were essentially pastoralists, and they were known as the Huns. And what really began to happen was that the Huns, these nomadic pastoralists and horsemen, there was a buildup of population amongst them and a buildup of their herds of livestock. And partly because of climatological change and so on, there was not enough rainfall, there was not enough pasture available to them. There were more and more Huns. And so they begin to move westward against the Ostrogoths and the Visigoths. And in fact, they confront these two tribes, as well as the so-called Alans, who I mentioned. And basically, either these different tribes, faced with this incredibly powerful and large invasion of the Huns, either immediately submit, as do the Ostrogoths, or they flee in the face of the advance of the Huns. And the group that in particular flees are the Visigoths, you see here. And they flee right across the border into Roman territory in an area which we can basically locate as equivalent to the contemporary state of Bulgaria. In other words, they crossed down from the Russian steppes into Bulgaria, crossing the Danube River and so on. And the Roman authorities are horrified. This occurs in 370 AD, this crossing of the Danube by the Visigoths. There probably was about something like 60,000 of these people. They had an army of between 15 and 20,000 warriors. And the Romans, who of course had been decimated by all of the crises and so on internally, they didn't have the power to expel them. So what the emperor, and the name of this emperor was the Emperor Valens, decided to do was to allow them to settle on Roman territory. They could settle where they were. But Valens, in his decree, said that they would have to give up their weapons. And this the Visigoths refused to do. And so Valens decided to march at the head of the Roman legions and forcibly disarm the Visigoths. And so he marches north, and at a place called Adrianople, you can see it on the map. In 378, he meets his death. The Visigoths destroy the Roman legions in 378 at the Battle of Adrianople. And with this death of the emperor and destruction of the legions at Adrianople, basically the whole empire is now open to barbarian invasion. Indeed, the situation is so bad that the Romans have some legions, they have some reserves, but faced with now the wholesale invasion of all of the groups that I've told you about, the East Goths and the West Goths, this is overwhelming. And so they begin to actually enroll more and more barbarians into the legions, holus bolus, in order to fight the other barbarian invaders. In other words, they don't have the means militarily to get Romans to fight the barbarians. Basically, the Roman state is, in its desperation, begins to enroll other barbarians to fight the invading barbarian armies. Well, it doesn't help them because the barbarians keep coming. And in a most dramatic development, these Visigoths, who, as I said, had defeated Valens at Adrianople, you can see this is their invasion right here. They, having defeated Valens, they ravage Greece, but then their chief, their head, a man by the name of Alaric the Visigoth, decides, well, I'm going to lead the Visigoths. We've taken what we could from Greece. We're going to invade Italy. And so sure enough, Alaric, you see this, this line, this purple line, from Greece, he leads the Visigoths all the way into Italy. And in 410, he actually captures and destroys the city of Rome. The fall of Rome occurs in 410, which is reported everywhere. And insofar as people get news, the fall of Rome is big news, 410. And it's, of course, this fall of Rome, which of course has a symbolic meaning, is the occasion for Augustine writing The City of God. Augustine's position is it really doesn't matter because the city of man is falling, but the city of God is triumphing. The church, the reign of Christ is triumphing. Well, Alaric seizes Rome, and then the Visigoths, if you can believe it, they move into southern France. They ultimately move into Spain. And in the end, this is where they find a home. They set up a kingdom. They had their chiefs become kings, and it ends up by the middle of the 5th century, a Visigothic barbarian kingdom is established in Spain. There is no longer any Roman authority here. Now, while this is happening, another group, I'm trying to pick up their trail. Just a second. Oh yes, here they are. Right here, this group, you see the so-called Vandals. Now today, when you say a Vandal, Vandal means thief. Well, it actually was a German tribe, but they became notorious or celebrated for the fact that they pillaged everything, they took everything. So that's how there's this translation of the term Vandal becomes the term for thief. And you can see their trajectory. They move through southern Germany, enter Gaul, and then once again move into Spain, and they end up where Carthage used to be. Carthage is no more. And they set up their own kingdom as well. So you have the Visigothic kingdom here, and you have a Vandal kingdom here in the course of the 5th century. And not only do they set up a kingdom at this point, but they learn how to, they become pirates, and they ravage all of the commerce of the Western Mediterranean. You can see their trajectory. They're raiding all along the coasts. This blue line in the Mediterranean. So we have the Visigoths here, we have the Vandals here. This is a big loss because North Africa was very important to the grain supply of the Roman Empire, and it now falls to the Vandals. So following all this, the main thing is where they end up in terms of what I'm saying. The Visigoths establish a kingdom here in Spain, the Vandals here in North Africa. So we can say that Spain is lost, so is North Africa. But meanwhile, the Franks here in northern Germany, they invade and take over most of northern France, and they establish their own kingdom. And furthermore, the Angles and the Saxons invade and conquer England. And so this is, the main thing here, as what one can say, is as a result of the collapse of Roman authority after 378, the barbarians basically take over most of the what was the Western Roman Empire. We can, to reiterate, the Angles and Saxons take over England, the Visigoths take over Spain, the Vandals take over North Africa, and most of Western Europe. And what's ever left of Roman there is an emperor still. He's trying desperately to hold on to Italy. Everything else has been stripped away, and Italy is only left. And here we can say that Italy itself is threatened because the Huns, who I said began to exert pressure on the German tribes from 370, and it was what drove the German barbarians into the Roman Empire. They themselves now invade the Roman Empire because the crisis in Central Asia, the buildup of population, the need for more living space, we could say, drives the Huns westward. And under their leader, Attila the Hun, he's the most famous during this period. He's the most famous of all these characters. I mentioned Alaric, who takes Rome in 410. But now we have Attila the Hun. And a gigantic invasion of Huns takes place right into Central Europe. And the Huns actually threaten to overrun the whole of the West. There is a famous meeting between Attila the Hun and the Pope. The Pope, fearing that remember that Italy is the only place left in the empire. It's not the emperor, but it's the Pope who travels to northern Italy and meets Attila the Hun and persuades him not to invade Italy, but to rather take his hordes of men westward into France. Well, two things occur. There is a battle in 451. The Huns meet up with the Roman, whatever is left of the Roman army, at a place called Chalons Battle of Chalons, 451. The Roman legions actually turned back the advance of the Huns in 451. But the ironic thing about this battle, the Battle of Chalons, actually there's a circumflex over the A, a little tent over the A. In 451, what's ironic about this is that the majority of the legionnaires who defeated Attila at this point in this important battle were actually Visigoths who had been enrolled in the legions because there weren't enough actually Romans to staff the army. So Attila is turned back, but never mind. One should say that despite the Pope's efforts, the Huns do not invade Italy, but a subordinate group, the Ostrogoths, who at the very beginning of this process had been under the Huns, now in 480 invade and occupy northern Italy. So the Visigoths control Spain, the Vandals control North Africa, the Anglo-Saxons control England, and now the Ostrogoths control northern Italy. For most of Italy, for practical purposes, is controlled by them. Essentially by 480, the Roman Empire in the West is no more, and there are essentially 5 barbarian kingdoms that have taken the place of the Roman Empire. And indeed, as part of this whole process, and I might say, we have a rough understanding that in the West, in Western Europe, at this time that we're talking about, there were about 16 million people. More than double that number lived in the Eastern Empire, but 16 million. The barbarians were no more than 1 million people. They were no more than 1 million, but they were fierce warriors. The Romans were too weak, and their armies, which none of these barbarian armies was more than 20 or 30,000 men, but the Roman legions could not cope with them. And but what has to be stressed is that their numbers were small. Indeed, what I would say is that in this initial phase of the barbarian invasions, there are 16 million Romans, and there are only about 1 million of these barbarians who've taken over. So that I would say that, of course, Roman political authority ceases to exist. But these barbarians were outnumbered by 16 to 1. And so there was a kind of twilight period when the Roman state had ceased to exist, but the barbarians were not able to impose their Germanic way of life on the Roman population, put it that way. Furthermore, not only that they had small numbers, but these Germanic tribes were not able, at the point that we're talking about, yes, the tribal chiefs of the Visigoths, of the Vandals, and so on, they stopped being chiefs and they declared that they were kings, but they were not capable, being the barbarians that they were not capable of setting up a real administrative structure. They didn't have the capacity. They were illiterate, these people. And so the kings and the sort of warrior nobles who led these barbarian kingdoms could not effectively govern. And as a matter of fact, insofar as there was any administration at all, it tended to be members of the old Roman elite who served as advisors or administrators in these sort of new crude administrations that were established in the wake of the Roman collapse. And it's important to say that furthermore, the lack of administration made it possible for, there was incredible violence, pillaging, social banditry. You have to understand that there's this terrible anarchy that sets in, and the violence and the fear of violence becomes endemic. This is really very, very wild, very, very wild period. It's only comparable with what we can compare it to, say, is states like Mali or Libya today, who are in a state of perpetual anarchy, or for that matter, El Salvador in Central America, which is a terrifying place. This is the sort of, in the hands of gangs and so on. This is the sort of situation that actually existed. So this is the situation with the fall of the empire. So rudimentary administration, basically based on the old Roman elites. And then I would say that the second main characteristics of these states is that the nobility, all of these tribes had their warrior nobles. They essentially took over. They expropriated some of these states of the Roman landlord class. The Roman landlord class was still out in the countryside with their slaves and their servants. Well, the barbarian warriors and the chiefs moved in, and basically they expropriated. They took over the estates of some of the Roman landlord class, but the majority of the Roman landlord class survives during this period. They have to make way for the new barbarian elite, but they coexist, is what I would say. And alongside them, these German peasant barbarians also get a certain amount of land and are the dependents of the new landed barbarian aristocrats. They live under them. They have a certain assurance of being able to keep their land. And there is this, the Germanic invaders coexist with the Roman aristocracies, their peasants and their slaves. And now the barbarians also have their landlord elite with their peasantries who basically coexist with them. Indeed, this kind of coexistence extends even to the legal systems. because by order of the kings, the Visigothic king, the Ostrogothic king, the Germans have their law, and the barbarians have their law. There are two laws, separate laws for the Germans and the barbarians. You'll excuse me, my cat is trying to get into the house. I have to prioritize that. My cat is a wonderful cat, but he's a nuisance. He's outside, but we'll wait the end of the lecture. Okay, so there's this kind of brittle relationship between the relatively small number of barbarians now and the Romans, two separate legal systems. One thing that does happen is that all of these new monarchies, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths in northern Italy, the Vandals, they all convert to Christianity. That does happen about 20 or 30 years after the kingdoms are established. All of these kings, they convert to Christianity. But it's important to say that their sense of themselves is such that even though they convert to Christianity, Christianity suits them, it suits the monarchies, because monotheistic religion and kingdom is better than some sort of tribal polytheism. Monotheism is more appropriate to some sort of overall kingdom. In any case, they are all Arian. Yes, they convert to Christianity, but they defy the Roman authority, which has rejected Arianism, insofar as they all become, or most of them become, Arian Christians. And so, again, there's a kind of a tension. Two different political systems, two versions of Christianity. Likewise. And so it was, and here I'm going to end, that as it turned out, this first wave of barbarian invasion and the establishment of the first barbarian kingdoms in the West proved relatively a short-term one. They were not Catholic, they were not Orthodox, they were few in number, and their legal systems were different from the Romans. And so there were these inherent weaknesses. It was only with the third wave of barbarian invasions, as we shall see in the next lecture, that the definitive map of medieval Europe and eventually of modern Europe began to take shape, as we will see in the next lecture. Have a lovely afternoon.